should push back against the teachings of this life, the indulgence of this world, and say there's another way to live. And Jesus is ultimately, to me, far more satisfying than anything else in this world. That's what happens when we live reflecting the light of life. So let me give you 3 ways that practically this will happen in your life. And these are not on your outline because they came late in the weekend sometime. I was thinking about today. And so let me give you 3 practical ways that this becomes a reality in your life. The first way is this, practically. How or what you prioritize will determine whether or not you are reflecting the light of Jesus. What do your priorities look like? And you say, well, I don't know what my priorities are. Pull out your calendar, pull out your checkbook. I'll tell you what your priorities are. I'll tell you what's most important to you by how you schedule your time and how you spend your treasure. How do you prioritize? Okay, here's one, another P. What you post will show what you want to reflect. There are always hot button issues. There are always meals being eaten that you want to show us what you had for supper. There will always be exceptional grandchildren that you want to brag about. But friends, would you consider that this vast audience that is looking at your life through what you post is determining what is important to you by what you say? Can I say something? Here's my email address, davidr@brookwoodbaptist.com. And so if you want to talk about this next statement, feel free to send me an email. Friends, Jesus did not die to assure you your constitutional rights. Why is it that with millions of people dying without Christ across the world, that when there is the least hint of my constitutional rights being violated, I'm all over that. But I won't ask for prayer for lost people around the world. My posting doesn't reflect that. What does your posting reflect? Third P is prayer. What do you pray about? What do you pray about? Will reflect what you're reflecting. Will show the world the light of Jesus or not. Will determine in your life, what are you pursuing? What are you praying about? Are you praying, Lord, help me today? Help my aunt, uncle, brother, sister, cousin, nieces, aunts, nephew, brother, best friend get over their flu? There's nothing wrong with praying about those things. But listen, friends, if your prayer life doesn't get any deeper than God make me feel better, then we're not following Jesus. Now, come on, church. Y'all out there? Follow Jesus. Practically speaking, consider, what are your priorities? What are you posting? What are you praying? Now, this symbolism of light is all through the Bible. And in the prophet Isaiah, we are given a prophecy about the life of Jesus. Isaiah talks a lot about the chosen servant or the suffering servant. We're familiar with passages like Isaiah 52 to 54, Isaiah 53, those passages. But in Isaiah 42, I've got this text for you. I want you to look at this. Look at these words. I will give you, and he's saying, I will give you the suffering servant, the chosen servant. I will give Jesus, the prophecy saying, as a covenant, as a promise for the people. A light for who? Just the children of God? No, for the nations. To open the eyes that are what? Blind. To bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. That's the mission of Jesus. So if I am going to reflect his light to the world around me, what is my life going to be about? It's going to be about, throw that verse back up there, friends. It's going to be about going to the prisoners in the dungeon who are in darkness and sharing with them the light. Now, First century prison, 21st century prison, nothing alike. First century, no food, no comfort, no nothing. Caves, dirty, rotting, rats. Nobody's feeding you unless one of your friends comes to bring you something to eat. You're fighting with the rats for the food. It's not a very friendly environment. And yet, where is Jesus going? He's going into the most unfriendly of environments, the most unhealthy, unclean, unholy places. Now, guess where symbolically I was before I met Jesus? In the dungeon, in the darkness. Now, this morning, if you would say, oh, no, that wasn't me. I wasn't in dungeon. I wasn't in the darkness. I was a pretty good person. You don't understand sin. You don't understand that at one time you were darkness. You don't get that Jesus had to die for your sin. You think that God somehow is doing himself a favor by saving you. Oh, church, listen, Jesus is about going to the prisoners, into the darkness. He's going to the places that are hidden. I mean, he's going behind the stuff. See, he's saying, listen, this is the stuff that everybody's forgotten about, that nobody knows is back here. Nobody cares about these things anymore. But he's saying, listen, this is important to me. And this was me. And this, I pray, is you. He went into the dungeon and into the darkness, and he rescues us with his light. Do you understand that? Are you glad for that this morning, church? Can somebody say amen? Can somebody praise the Lord this morning? Because you've been saved by grace out of the dungeon and darkness of sin into the light of life. If you're here this morning and you know that you're suffering, you're living in the darkness of this world, I'm telling you right now, Jesus is inviting you out of the darkness into his light. And he will not reject you. I don't care where you've been, what you've done. I don't care what's going on in your life right now. Jesus will not reject you. His arms are wide open. Not only will he receive you, but he'll hold you securely for all eternity. That's his promise to us. If this is what Jesus does, then this is what those who reflect his light, who are children of light, who walk in the light, should be doing. In May of 1543, the astronomer Copernicus lay on his deathbed. His life's work was being published. Copernicus' life work was that the earth was not the center of the universe. That the sun was not revolving around the earth, but the earth was revolving around the sun as it spun on its axis. And so when we say that the sun is rising or that the sun is setting, we're actually being anti-Copernicus. Because the sun doesn't set, nor does it rise. The earth moves around the sun. And even in the darkest hour of night, the sun's presence can be felt as it reflects off the face of the moon. So the sun is always evident. We've heard it said, people have made the statement, you've heard it before. In the midst of a tragedy, in the midst of crisis, somebody will say, well, where was God? Where was God when that happened, when this tragedy took place? Maybe to answer that question would be to say that he has left his reflection in his children. And in the darkest hour of our lives and the world around us, he is saying, my son Jesus is the light of the world through the lives of his followers. To say, whereas God, to think that he was not in the midst of our crisis, our tragedy, would be like thinking that the sun, when it sets, has abandoned its post or forsaken its responsibility. But friends, the only way the world will know that God is still God in the midst of their tragedy is if they see him reflected on us. Can the light shine any brighter than in the darkness? How is Jesus being reflected in your life today? Is the light of the world reflected in your life? Can others see in you the calm assurance of Christ's victory over sin, the peace that surpasses understanding, and the sovereignty of Christ over sin and death in your life? Let me ask you to bow your heads. And let us consider this